We've just gotten some absolutely unbelievable news a couple days ago talking about Kadena shutting down forever. And so this is, I don't even know where to start to unpack this. There's so much to talk about here, discussing several different things. First off, what does this mean for Kaspa? Is this a good thing? Is this potentially a sign of things to come? I personally don't believe that's the case. I think there's a whole bunch of different reasons, and we're going to go over all of the different reasons as to why I think something like what happened to Kadena cannot happen to Kaspa. Now, of course, it is crypto. Anything can happen. I could be wrong. Kaspa could shut down. We lose all our money, all this type of stuff. It is, of course, entirely possible, but I do think there are some key fundamental differences that I do want to go over in this video. So first off, let's talk about the news of the day, which is Kadena. Essentially, Kadena just shut down. The team was like, we ran out of money and we're not going to support the chain anymore. Good luck, everybody. And that's basically what happened. So super unfortunate circumstance for anybody who was part of the Kadena chain. They all basically just lost everything. But unfortunately, like that can happen in crypto, right? That can happen to literally anyone in crypto. I mean, there are a couple that, you know, maybe are kind of past that, things like Ethereum, potentially Bitcoin, things like that. But anything can happen in crypto, right? I think this is a sobering reminder that, you know, crypto is very volatile. It's very dangerous, and anything can in fact happen. And so you just need to be very careful. Now, of course, I do like to see this type of outreach. There have been so many people in the Kaspa community that have really taken the time to help, you know, reach out to the Kadena community, let them know that proof of work still is alive in a kind of a new iteration. It's on Kaspa. Give it a look and, you know, kind of go from there. So I do think that it's nice to see that level of interaction coming here from the Kaspa community. There are some people who are kind of gloating and showboating, which again, I don't understand that. I don't get the purpose there. This is the part of the tribalism in crypto that really annoys me. But we have seen a lot of like really great, I think, kind of people reaching out, because that's ultimately how you drive more adoption to your chain, right? Find people that might feel alienated some way, find people that might be looking for the next thing, and show them Kaspa. And so that is, of course, the thing that I find really interesting and really good to see here. Also, you'll see that I'm trending. It's actually not me, but I saw this here, which I thought was pretty funny. So I just figured I'd point that out. Now, the other thing that I want to take a look at here is, well, what's next for Kaspa, and could this, you know, is this a sign of potential things to come for Kaspa? Can this happen to Kaspa? All this type of stuff. Now, I personally don't think that something like this can happen to Kaspa. Again, anything can happen, right? But I think it's much more unlikely because of a couple of different things. The nature of Kaspa is far more decentralized than something like Kadena. Kadena was a VC-backed coin that essentially had a centralized company and a team working on it. If that team stops working, the coin dies, like we saw. Now, Kaspa does have a core team working on it, but it's much more decentralized. It's much more community driven. If the core team stopped working on Kaspa, theoretically it could continue on into the future. Maybe not at the same pace, maybe not at the same level of like momentum or things like that we have seen so far, but it theoretically could still continue. And I think that's kind of the major thing to understand here. Now, the other piece you will see why I have this particular X post up is you'll see that Kaspa is a top 100 coin. It's the only one with no Binance, no Gate.io, no OKX, no Coinbase, no Crypto.com, no Robinhood, and no HTX. So this is essentially, you know, kind of one of the interesting things about Kaspa is, you know, it is one of the larger coins that doesn't really have a lot of that centralized exchange adoption. It still is relatively decentralized. Now, this is, of course, hampering the growth slightly, but I do think it is also potentially increasing the stability. Now, recently, I use stability very loosely, not necessarily meaning price, but stability of the project. Because if we go and we check out the Kaspa chart, it has been anything but stable. Kaspa has had a very difficult 2025. If we go ahead and we take a look here at the chart, you will see I have the daily chart up here. It's been a rough little while for Kaspa. Definitely not the greatest thing to see. We had this nice little ascending channel going on here, and then we broke out of that, and now it's basically just been down only since then. We have seen kind of some limited pumps here and there, but particularly ever since, let's call it the end part of July, it's pretty much really been kind of down only, which is quite quite unfortunate for Kaspa. And then of course, when we saw that liquidation event happen, we saw Kaspa get all the way down to about 1 cent, an 87% decrease in the span of 24 hours. I think Kaspa was one of the most negatively impacted cryptos in the space. And I think a lot of that is just largely due to the lack of liquidity, due to the lack of exchange coverage that we've seen. But you can see here that Kaspa is definitely, it's pushing towards the bottom of the Bollinger Bands here. It is pushing towards the bottom of the RSI. I have to think that we are getting close to a bottom. Of course, when you think the bottom is in, it can always go lower and you can always see it fall further. But it does look like there has been a decent level of support found kind of at this 4.8 cent range. Now, what we can see happening right now as we speak is we did see a break above this key level of resistance. It's now been turned into a support, and we are actively seeing price test this level of support. If we go back down to the hourly, you will see that we are kind of getting closer there. We have already seen on the hourly chart some kind of level of support being held up at this level. Ideally, we need to see support continue to hold and show that price is going to start to have more strength for Kaspa as it starts to move back to the upside. That is a really, really important thing here. If it does not happen, then of course, we can always go lower, which would be really sucky, but it is entirely possible. So with this whole Kadena situation, I do hope that we have kind of some more adoption of potentially new people looking to get into the Kaspa ecosystem. But we also do have the risk of what could potentially happen if, Kaspa does continue to struggle. Maybe the team decides to leave and shut down and close up shop. That is always a possibility. Again, due to the more decentralized nature of Kaspa, I do still think, that the project would continue on. But that would likely be incredibly damaging for price because the level of speed and momentum is really, really going to slow down. Now, if we look at the total 3 market cap, let's go take a look here. We could see that we are potentially have maybe found a bottom here. We're starting to see a little bit more consistency and structure form in price, which is really, really good to see. We're actually really not that far off of all-time highs here. You can see here about 1.19 trillion is the all-time high for the altcoin market cap. Now we're at about 1.01 trillion, so we'll call it 20%-ish off of all-time highs. So relatively close-ish again for crypto standards. So I do think, of course, we are kind of squished between these levels of support and resistance between kind of the 1 trillion and the 1.02 trillion range. We have been rejected several times at this 1.02 trillion range. So we do want to essentially be making sure that we are getting some momentum here and we can actually break this level. And then the next one from there would be all the way up at the 1.09 trillion. So not really too much liquidity in this zone. If we do see this break, I do think there is that possibility that we see a pretty decent run back to the upside here. So we'll have to see kind of exactly what goes on here, but potentially a pretty good spot where we could start to look for some upside here. But again, you really do never know for sure. Crypto is a wild place where things are always unprecedented things are always happening. So overall, that's what we have for the Kaspa news today. Kaspa outlasting some of its competitors. Kaspa proof of work still alive and well and kicking, hopefully gaining larger communities as others kind of abandon them. And then hopefully, we continue to see it grow and thrive. Now, if you have any comments, I'd love to hear all of your comments in the comment section below. What do you think about the Kadena situation? Do you think Kaspa could survive a similar type of Kadena situation? Would it also collapse? Do you think that's potentially coming in the future? I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on all of these. And then also, of course, if you did enjoy the content and find it valuable, a like, subscribe, and then hitting that notification bell does, of course, help a ton with the algorithm and all that type of good stuff. So I really do appreciate it. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.